Good morning. Welcome to the Eastern Planning Committee of BCP Council on the 8th of July. I'm Councillor Paul Hilliard, Chair of the committee. If we can go to the apologies first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Gillian Martin and Councillor Joe Salmon. Substitute members, we have Councillor Patrick Canavan here for Councillor Martin and Councillor Kate Salmon is here for Councillor Joe Salmon.
Thank you for that. If now just introduce the committee and other officers. So, Councillor.
I'm Councillor Marion Le Pedvin for Newtown and Heatherlands, and I'm Vice Chair of the committee.
Yeah, Councillor Rice, Oakdale Ward.
I'm Councillor Patrick Canavan here as a substitute.
Councillor Kate Salmon from Moordown Ward.
Councillor Michael Tarling, Christchurch Town.
Councillor Joe Clements, Penhill Ward.
Cameron Adams, Councillor of Kinton.
Lawrence Williams, representing Littledown and Iford.
David Flagg, Burton Grange Ward.
Matt Gillett, Talbot Woods.
Thank you. We're also joined by Peter Burridge, Team Leader of Planning, along with some officers, Eden Evan, Steve Davies and Tom Hubbard. We've got Robert Herthurth, the Senior Solicitor, and then Jill Hollyoak, Democratic Services, along with Sinead and Rebecca from Democratic Services. Are there any declarations of interest of things we're discussing today? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Items A and C. Item A, I objected to at the Lower Gardens Trust as a member, so I feel I've predetermined. And similarly with item C, Pavilion, I also sit on the same trust and heard it already. And finally, item D, Thistle Barrow Road. I shall depart from this seat and join my residence as a ward councillor.
So, Councillor Williams, just to confirm, so A and C, you'll also be stepping out, or?
I'll sit there, yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Gillett?
Yeah. Conflict of interest with item A, as I'm the chair of the Lower Gardens Committee, and also predetermined, as I spoke on record, in favour of the Burnmans, and also predetermined as the Lower Gardens Committee voted in favour of the development as well. So I'll be sitting over there. Apparently we're leaving the room. We're off to the cafe, and I'm not hardly going to be here today, but just to annoy Rob, I'll be leaving for that one as well then.
Okay, thanks for clarifying those. No other interests? Okay, so then moving on to confirmation of minutes of our meeting of the 9th of May. Were there anything to raise from that, or is everyone happy to approve? Happy to approve, thank you. Then moving 5, so public issues. So after the officer presentations, we will hear any public speakers, followed by any ward councillors and other councillors on each item. So that moves us straight into 6A, land at Lower Gardens, Bournemouth. Officer.
Okay, this application is for a temporary use of land as a roller skating rink, including the stationing of stretch tent roof, flooring, fencing, lighting, big screen and mobile bar and catering cabin and toilet. The application site is in the Lower Gardens and it's before committee today as BCP is the landowner. Here you can see the site location plan. This is a rough outline of the site location on an aerial view of the Lower Gardens. So you can see the application site is located between Bournemouth Square and the pier. It's on a parcel of land bound on 4 sides, with the River Bourne on one side and footpaths on the other 3. Here you can see the site layout plan, which gives a sense of the scale of different elements within the site and the different event paraphernalia. I would note that the layout of event paraphernalia on the southeastern section of the site has now been amended somewhat in order to protect the liquid amber tree on the site. This will be detailed in a later slide. Here you can see the proposed elevation drawings. In terms of the scale of the temporary structures, from the proposed elevations, the maximum height of the stretch tent is approximately 8 metres to its tallest point, and it starts approximately 3.15 metres above the ground. From the proposed elevations, the picket fencing shown measures approximately 1.1 metres in height and 1.4 metres in height to the posts. Here you can see an annotated satellite view with some nearby places and commercial offerings highlighted. Considering the principle of a temporary permission for a leisure and recreation use, it's considered that this is not out of keeping with the character of the area. The surrounding area contains many commercial and leisure uses. Within the garden itself are a number of food and drink kiosks, as well as a mini golf course close to the application site. The proposed location for the roller rink is just to the southeast of the temporary winter ice rink in recent years. The principle of a temporary sporting and recreation facility has therefore been considered acceptable in this location and is not considered out of character. It's also considered that there are clear public benefits from the proposal, comprising an enhanced leisure offering in the town centre and contribution to economic development. A number of policies promote leisure development in the town centre and an enhanced leisure offering. These public benefits have been accorded significant weight in the planning balance. I have a series of images here to illustrate the site from different ways of approaching within the lower gardens. The view here is if you were to look south towards the site, if you're approaching, for instance, from the footpath down from the square. Objection has been raised by a number of consultees regarding the impact on the Grade 2 listed gardens, including the LPA Heritage Officer and LPA Urban Design Officer. Issues raised include the visual and audio intrusion of the proposal, the obstruction of views across the gardens, and the impact on trees and the lawn. If approaching from the footpath up from the pier, the site is round a slight bend behind the kiosk you can see here on the right. This is walking alongside the site, angled towards the square, so angled northwest. This is a view looking north towards the site from the other side of the Bourne, so down from where the bird sanctuary and the marketplace is. And finally, if you were to walk along the site on the other side of River Bourne, the site is here on your left. Trees have been an important consideration in assessing the proposal, forming an essential part of the character of the gardens. The trees are on the southeast section of the site. There's a group of mature pine trees, which are considered to be sufficiently protected. Within the site is a liquid amber tree, you can see in the photo on the right. Following an initial objection raised by the LPA tree officer, arboricultural information had been received, which has reconfigured the layout of the temporary event paraphernalia around the root protection area of the tree that you can see in this image. The LPA tree officer stated that the tree has been harmed by previous installations at the site and is in poor condition. It's acknowledged there would be some impact on the tree, but the protection measures proposed are considered to be what is feasible. Given its current condition and the assessment that it's of low amenity value, whilst there will be some impact on the tree, this is not considered sufficiently harmful as to warrant a reason for refusal, subject to the protection measures proposed in the arboricultural information provided. Objection was raised by the LHA regarding the proposed siting of the bins, which were considered to interfere with the operation of buses on Jervis Place. However, members will note from the addendum that a revised information received proposed a new location for bin collection, which is shown here on Exeter Crescent. This is considered an acceptable location, subject to the appropriate condition. The other concern relating to highways refers to the impact on pedestrians within the lower garden. Concerns were raised, particularly in relation to the build and breakdown of the temporary structures, that the proposal will introduce vehicles and result in park closure during the peak time of the year, when the footpath between the square and the seafront is heavily used, with little information initially provided regarding footpath closures relating to the proposal. As members will have seen with the addendums, information was subsequently received which allowed this aspect to be assessed. You can see on this slide an excerpt from the build plan showing instruction to the central footway and the timings, notably the 4 days prior to opening and the day after closure. The LHA continues to raise objection regarding the impact on pedestrians, as the footpath in the central section you can see here would be reduced to 2.5 metres. It is acknowledged there would be some harm to pedestrian use, however this is considered to be limited given that there is still some access through this section, and it is only for the days and times shown on this slide. This limited harm is therefore considered outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme in the planning balance. Members will note from the officer report and addendums that the scheme has also been assessed in relation to residential amenity, notably in relation to noise and to bats, which are a protected species. As detailed in the addendum, subject to the relevant conditions, these impacts are considered acceptable. However, there remain issues which have not been sufficiently addressed. Earlier this year, biodiversity net gain, part of the Environment Act of 2021, became mandatory. All development must comply with this legislation unless exempt. Temporary developments are not one of the listed exemptions to the legislation. On the application form submitted, it was stated that the de minimis exemption applies. The legislation requires that the exemption is justified with the planning application, and an appropriate justification has not been received. The exemption must be demonstrated with sufficient evidence, which would then be assessed by the LPA ecologist. If the application is not exempt, it would have to comply, and concerns have been raised that the applicant would not be able to do this. It's therefore not considered that this issue can be addressed by condition. In relation to flooding, the application site is at high risk of flooding. It's located in flood zone 3, with flood risk from multiple sources, and a high risk of flash flooding in summer periods with thunderstorms after hot weather. The lead local flooding authority has raised concerns about displaced flood risk. The flood risk assessment provided with the application does not sufficiently address the issue, and the LLFA does not agree with the applicant's conclusion on displaced flooding. Whilst there are no properties in or immediately adjacent to the gardens, if a large flood were to occur whilst the rink is in place, flooding could be deeper in other parts of the park because of it, potentially affecting some of the small commercial uses. Given the limited information provided, it's not been possible to do a full assessment on the extent of this. In conclusion, in the planning balance, it's considered there is less than substantial harm to the designated heritage asset, and that this is considered moderate in nature due to the temporary proposal. It is acknowledged that there is an impact on pedestrians which is harmful, but is outweighed by the public benefits afforded by the proposal. Other issues noted are considered acceptable subject to the relevant conditions. However, we cannot be confident that the proposal would be exempt from or compliant with national legislation on biodiversity net gain, and the application has failed to demonstrate an acceptable impact on flooding within the lower gardens. In the absence of information required to address these issues, it's considered that the proposal cannot be supported, and it's accordingly recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you for presentation. Are there any other officers coming in at this time? No. Over to Ms. Hollyoak.
So we have no registered objectors to speak on this item. So moving on to speakers for the applicant, we've got Matt Annan, followed by Simon Brooks. If you'd like to come up and speak, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, members. The planning officer has explained the full details of the proposed scheme in our opening presentation to you, and as set out in the report, there is no issue in principle with this proposal. It's in full compliance with policy U8 of the Town Centre Area Action Plan, which encourages leisure, culture and entertainment facilities into the town centre for visitors and residents of all ages. Policy 7.10 of the local plan promotes public and private indoor and outdoor sports and recreation facilities as well. Our clients only received the yes from the Gardens Trust on the 20th of May. So a lot of work has been done between now and then to get this application before you today. It's an unusual one for both of us as your planning officers. If approved today, the plan is to have it live by the 19th of July in time for the summer holidays when the kids break up, which would mean the builds need to start next week. We must thank Eden, your planning officer, who's been fantastic. Her dialogue, communication throughout, as we have knocked off all of these issues that have been raised, just leaving these two technical issues preventing your officers recommending grant today. This is B&G and flooding. Both reports to address these matters have now been submitted to the officer, albeit only within the last few days. And so what we're asking members to do today is to grant permission subject to these reports receiving the sign-off from the respective internal consultees, which hopefully can be done this week. In terms of B&G, from the outset, it's been our assumption that the exemption would apply. The grass is not being dug up. It's a 38-day structure. Saventa here have committed £4,000 to reseeding the whole area. In our view, this will be restored within the 2-year period required by the legislation. But now we have a report which confirms it not only be restored, but improved upon by 35%, significantly shorter timeframe as well. And with regards to flooding, the submitted FRA submitted over the weekend, albeit, has confirmed the proposals can take place without increasing flooding elsewhere external to Bournemouth Gardens, and without, importantly, changing the flood risk vulnerability. This is obviously something which the LPA accepted last October when granting the significantly larger ice rink proposal. So members, we hope that you move to grant today and vote in favour of supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Good morning. I've been in business in Bournemouth for 14 years. We operate a coffee shop in the square, which is the heart of the town centre, and our Christmas in Bournemouth event throughout the town and gardens, which brings in millions to the economy and much needed footfall. I only say this so that you understand that we do really care about this town. I do also want to thank Eden, who has been very understanding in the process, even when I may have been naive in its complexities, especially B&G report, which I have never seen in temporary events before. So I was learning as we go. We do now have that B&G report, which, as Matt has said, shows an uplift of 30% when only 10 is required. The flood risk of the site has been explained to us, but we do now have a flood risk report which shows that no displacement outside the gardens occurs, with the mitigation that we have put in place, which includes the raised areas and permeable fabrics being used. This event and its plans have been approved by the Lower Gardens Trust Board, the BCP events team, and also the Rigorous Safety Advisory Group. The town centre, gardens and beach have had a very negative time recently, with some awful situations taking place, which have also caused dreadful PR for the brand of Bournemouth. This event brings 24-hour security at our cost to the Lower Gardens, and it brings life to the town centre, both of which are so desperately needed. This proposal is for a 5-week pop-up roller rink, fitness classes, yoga classes, and it has the full support of the accommodation bid, the destination management board, the town centre bid, and local hoteliers. And we, as local operators, have a proven track record. If you recommend to refuse this event today based on B&G, which we do now have, and displacement of floodwater, which we now have a report showing it doesn't cause, I do fear that this will be yet another nail in the coffin for Bournemouth tourism.
Thank you for that. Nate?
Thank you. And we've got Councillor Stephen Bartlett to speak on this application also.
Morning, members. In 1872, the Merrick Estate granted consent for the appropriation of the gardens for use as a public garden for the inhabitants of Bournemouth. And in 2011, the owning charity set out the trustees' responsibility to allow the use of the gardens in a way which is necessary or desirable for the use of beneficiaries, i.e. residents, enjoying the charity's land as public gardens. Should this application go ahead, this area of the garden will not be able to be used for its intended purpose. but it will be turned into a commercial, noisy event space that is totally out of character for the listed gardens. The development is badged primarily as a roller skating rink with supporting alcohol and food sales. However, the overall site size is 0.13 hectares and the roller skate rink itself is only 10 metres by 15 metres, not even the size of your back garden probably. This is only 11.5% of the overall site space, leaving most of the site available for alcohol and catering services, which I suggest is the primary reason for this proposal, as opposed to its use as a roller skate rink. I believe the installation of the huge and potentially noisy TV screen and the flow of alcohol gives a clue to the environment that will be created. Large TV displays have been used in the garden previously, but only for a few days at a time and for very special occasions. Hence, this should not be seen as setting an acceptable precedent for setting up a large TV for several weeks over the summer period. I congratulate the planning officer for producing such a thorough report, and whilst I agree with the recommendation to refuse, I have also drawn different conclusions to the planning balance. The report accepts that the development causes less than substantial harm to the significance of the gardens as a designated heritage asset, but this harm is offset by benefits which include an economic benefit. This factor is given significant weight to the planning decision. However, I suggest that the public benefits are not sufficient to outweigh this harm for the following reasons. Firstly, the report suggests the rink will contribute to the quality of the overall experience of visiting Bournemouth and can draw people to the town centre. I disagree, as in my opinion, this tiny skate rink would appear to be, and will be seen to be, a token gesture to secure a prime commercial area to sell alcohol and food. It should be noted that previous roller rinks in the town were proven to be commercially unviable. Further, I do not believe this facility offers more attraction than that offered by the continued availability of the whole of the existing gardens. The gardens are a major attraction in themselves, and to remove part of them, even temporarily, reduces the attractiveness of the garden, resulting in a degradation in the quality of the overall experience for residents and visitors, as opposed to a contribution to it. Secondly, the centre of Bournemouth abounds with alcohol and food outlets. Many of these businesses who pay business rates all year round rely on summer sales to cover their costs through the outer season times. The introduction of a competitor that can operate at much lower costs adversely affects the viability of those other businesses, and this could lead to further decline in the town centre. The proposed skate rink will not attract more visitors or residents to the town, but it will displace footfall from existing businesses. Our planning decisions need to work for these businesses and not against them. We need to bear in mind that the council's own Pavilion Terrace is just a stone's throw from the proposed site. Thirdly, although temporary, the development, if approved, will prevent the use of this part of the garden from being used when all available garden space is needed to accommodate the vast numbers of people visiting or transiting through the garden. This will also result in all garden users being forced to use the only remaining clear garden area, and this area has not yet recovered from the massive damage caused by locating the ice rink on this area over the last Christmas period. It will also result in damage to the grass at the development site itself. It should also be noted that if a roller rink facility is considered desirable in the town centre, the BIC already has a facility for providing this, as it has done previously. My last objection is that the gardens are listed and are of national importance. We are obliged to protect them in the same way that we would prevent a listed building from harm. The listed gardens should be afforded the same protection. Please respect and help to preserve our listed gardens by refusing this application. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Ms Evan, is there anything from what you've said you need to respond on, in particular maybe the flood risk and the B&G updates?
Yeah, regarding the outstanding information regarding BNG and flooding, unfortunately, they were not received in time to be taken into consideration, having only been received, at the weekend and one on Friday. And these are pieces of information that I'm not qualified to assess. They would need to be assessed by the lead local flooding authority and by the LPA ecologist. So I can't comment, unfortunately, on whether or not these information received would meet the requirements that we're looking for.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll just move over to questions now of clarification. So any questions? Councillor Salmon?
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry if I've missed it somewhere in the report. It's hopefully an easy one. I just want to know what the plan is for the big TV. What are they going to put on the big TV? Is it the Olympics, or is that the idea, or is there another idea behind it?
Ms Evan?
I mean, that's not information that's been supplied with the application, unfortunately. So
if the committee's acceptable, if we can now ask the applicant if you can come to the mic and just say, please. Thank you.
The big TV is for Olympics and film nights. Every Wednesday night, we have a film screening from 8 till 10.
Any other questions, Councillor Salmon? No, Councillor Tarling?
Yeah, the applicant's agent made a remark about reseeding and a 2-year period for sort of reinstatement of the grassed area. Is that, I couldn't see that in the report, apologies if I missed it. What is the mitigation for getting the land back to its original state?
So there is a grass management plan that was submitted with the application. I've confirmed with the parks team that they've seen, and there is an agreement in place with them. And then, it was mentioned about reseeding and a financial contribution that's been agreed separate from the planning application with the parks team. Therefore, if the committee is minded to recommend approval of the application, then I would recommend that be conditions compliance with that grass management plan. However, coming back to the application in terms of biodiversity net gain, unfortunately that doesn't satisfy the requirements of biodiversity net gain. So that in order to demonstrate the 2-year period for biodiversity net gain, we need information on the current condition of the grass and specific information that it would go back to that exact baseline condition as per the metric categories, and that has not been received with the application.
Yeah, just to come back on that, I'll be honest. Yeah, I know a bit about B&G and its relevance here. Personally, doesn't bother me as much as the loss of amenity with grass. And when I hear reseeding and 2 years, and I thought the 2 years would be, if you're going to reseed the grass, even at the end of the summer, it means that we're not going to have anything. You can't sit on it for until the next season. In my opinion, and yeah, so that was the question more about it's a loss of amenity rather than the B&G aspect of it.
Any other questions, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not an expert on BNG, but I mean, just from a practical point of view, would it not be more appropriate to turf it rather than seed it and get an immediate effect? I don't know.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just wondering if members might appreciate a little explanation on statutory BNG, because I'm aware it's something that members won't necessarily have come across up to now. So, Chair, I'm going to be very brief on this because it's a huge issue in its own right, and it's something which certainly we will be providing further assistance to members on in the near future. The applicant himself alluded to the fact that it's not something he's come across before. Well, I think the reason for that is that BNG only came into effect for major applications in February and for more small scale applications in April. So indeed it is something that's new. Biodiversity is not new, and members will be well aware that they've had those issues come up through local plans, but statutory biodiversity net gain is now something that sits alongside other biodiversity considerations. And in effect, what it does is it imposes a condition on all permissions that are affected by it, which aren't exempt, which basically requires an applicant to submit a plan that shows how they are effectively going to deliver 10% biodiversity gain on the site. So when you start talking about issues like whether you could turf and not turf, those considerations would fall into this equation as to whether or not what would happen would deliver biodiversity net gain to the satisfactory percentage of 10%. As already been indicated by the planning officer, some of these questions are very technical. And one of the problems is a lot of this is now, because it's new, it's fair to say every authority in the land is now coming to terms with it and having to learn. And a lot of it's falling on the hands of ecologists, both within and externally of the council, to try and give some assistance on some of these technical points. So yes, turfing might be an option, but I think one of the problems will be to understand if it wasn't exempt, and of course if it was exempt it wouldn't bite, but if it wasn't exempt, the question would be, would that deliver 10% gain? And it might or might not, and if it didn't, it wouldn't be acceptable. So Chair, I don't know if that's of any help. That's a very potted explanation.
No, that was very useful. Councillor Hermans, any other points at this time? No. Councillor Pavilion.
Thank you. I've got two totally unrelated questions, but related obviously to this application. The first is the pedestrian issue, which you acknowledged. Could you clarify a bit more on measurements and you know the extent of the problem?
Yes, certainly. Perhaps I could reshare my screen again. And also I have my colleagues from the Highway Authority that perhaps may want to jump in to confirm. But I'll just share my screen a moment. So to confirm, this is an excerpt from the build plan. It's not the whole build plan. Sorry, bear with me. It doesn't appear to be showing that. Sorry, bear with me. My screen seems to have frozen. Can members see? Sorry about that. Can you see that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is an excerpt from the build plan provided. It's not the only plan showing some obstruction. I can show the other one shortly afterwards. But if you can see the blue area shown there, that is shown as obstructing the central walkway to the lower gardens central footpath. As you can see on the right hand side, the width of the pavement is 500 centimetres, and it would be reduced to 250 centimetres when this area is occupied for loading and unloading. So that is one of the chief obstructions associated with the proposal. There is another obstruction on other days. If you can bear with me through hopefully less technical hitches to show the other plan. But there is also obstruction on fewer days. So confirming that would be between the build period, so the 4 days leading up to it from the 15th onwards, and then the day after, the installation is due to be finished, and then also for loading and unloading before 9 AM.
So it won't be there throughout the period of use if we agree it.
No.
Right, thank you.
I don't know if the colleagues from Highways want to come in at the moment.
No, I don't think they do at this time, but we might need you if you in a moment.
And the other point is on the sale of alcohol. Presumably that either has or will go through licensing.
Yes, there is. So I've got a copy of the licensing here if members are interested. So the supply of alcohol, the license stands as between 10 AM and 10:30 PM.
So licensing have already agreed it?
Yeah.
In principle?
Yeah, so that's Monday to Sunday.
Thank you.
And I would note also, if it's of interest, then recorded music, films, so essentially the noise generating aspects of the proposal, that has been licensed between 10 and 11 PM.
Thank you.
Councillor Rice.
Yeah, do you have anything more to say on the noise aspect? I think it mentions in the report about the gardens can be quite noisy themselves, but noise from a screen is very different from the general hubbub of lots of individuals speaking to each other and playing.
Yeah, so on the noise front, firstly to say there's obviously no residences in close vicinity towards the gardens, but obviously there would be noise from the proposal. The environmental health officer has had a look at a noise management plan that was submitted with the application. Initially, there was some concern raised that noise wasn't being adequately dealt with within that, and then the amended plan was received, which was considered to be acceptable by the environmental health officer. However, I would note also that the EHO noted if noise instances were to occur and it was to become a problem, that is something that the environmental health officer could address under other legislation, so aside from the planning application. I don't know if that clarifies at all, but
well, I'm just wondering whether what is the legislation levels in terms of noise in a park? Maybe that's quite different from interrupting an individual person's home if it was next to a home. Are the levels sort of for intervention similar, or are they more relaxed in open spaces?
I'm not sure I can answer that, I'm afraid, without asking environmental health. I don't know.
I'd just try and help you, but obviously we've assessed it with regards to the planning policy. In terms of the specific noise levels, I think you're probably talking more about environmental health legislation. In terms of the planning policy, we're looking at to see whether it would be harmful, the levels of noise would be harmful. The noise report has been submitted and reviewed by the environmental health officer, and they are content with the levels which that report is specifying. But in terms of whether the noise, I think the answer is that the report has to respond to the context. And obviously in this context, you have regard to the background noise levels. That will be important, the background noise levels of that area, and also the distance away of the closest receptors, I think they call them, so the closest residential properties. And we also have to acknowledge that this is the town centre location where you would reasonably expect noise, more noise and disturbance than you would in a residential area. So I think that's how they've approached it.
Yes, I suppose that's helpful clarification. I suppose my point is there's no comment on about the difference between noise coming out of a screen and general hubbub noise, whereas hubbub noise may be better for society, whereas screen noise is completely different, but they're not distinguished as, in planning terms, they're not distinguished as one's beneficial and one's harmful. Or, you know what I mean?
I think I know what you're getting at, yeah, but I think that would be covered by the noise management plan, and that would obviously have regards to the different noise generators on site. And yes, so the environmental health officer is happy with what's been submitted.
Okay, thank you for that.
Am I able to come back now the document's loaded just to show the other path of obstruction in response to Chair's question? Because there is a another plan. If I could just share that with members. So if members are to see that, this was not shown because it's for fewer days again, but this is another obstruction to the footpath. You can see on the northern section. So from the writing on the right hand side, you can see that this would only be on the Monday and Tuesday previous to the event, and then also the Tuesday of the breakdown. So there are these two plans provided showing impact on the pathways.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any final questions before we move? Councillor Rice?
We don't have any idea about what would be an appropriate size of roller skate rink. Sort of 10 by 15 meters seems very small. So I'm just wondering if there's any sort of guidance about best size for it to be.
Sheila?
Not that I'm aware of, I'm afraid, but I'm not sure honestly on that point.
Yeah, I'll just make the point that obviously the application has come before us with the size of rink which has been specified. So I presume you'd think that the applicant is of the opinion that that is acceptable, and that this is the application which has come before us. So this is the application which we would need to determine.
Okay, and just to confirm from me then, so obviously there's a time constraint, so the information was provided you potentially for the BNG and the flood. We haven't had time to look at that and see if it's acceptable. So from a committee point of view, if we were going down the route of approval and the BNG report wasn't acceptable, what does that fall on the council? What position would that be? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I would say that the reason that these haven't been suggested as conditions is because there is a risk that the conditions couldn't be discharged, which is not a situation we would of course look for. I don't know if Rob has any further comment on that.
Chair, I think my comment on that would be, I mean, if members were minded to essentially, and I use the phrase with caution, but kick the can down the road. In other words, pause the decision now and then essentially pass it back to officers to look at further to be able to assess the information. I think you'd have to do, and I've been thinking about how you might try and word this, and it's not easy, but I think what you'd possibly have to do is basically resolve to approve, I think, but, and then there'd be a but, and the but would be, well, I'll read out what I've written, and I apologise in advance, or I know this is long and it's complicated, but this is the best I've been able to come up with in time. So I think you'd resolve to approve, but subject to the head of planning operations, who's head of planning, being satisfied that sufficient information has been provided to enable the head of our planning operations, in his opinion, to reach a view as to whether, one, the proposal is exempt from statutory biodiversity net gain, and two, if concerns regarding flood risk have been adequately addressed. Together in that event, with power being delegated to the head of planning operations to determine the final wording of the conditions identified, together with such conditions or obligations, essentially as he considers appropriate in relation to those issues, or that would be little two, power being delegated to the head of planning if he considers there remains insufficient information on either of those 2 points, so I'm summarising now, to refuse the application. So essentially you would be giving him power to decide one way or the other, depending on how he reached the conclusion, and to impose conditions. And I think if you were minded to go down that route, the other thing I think you'd have to do is probably ask my colleague sitting to my left, Mr. Burridge, to perhaps give some thoughts of the conditions that might be imposed at this stage, so that it's something that could form part of the resolution as well.
That's useful, because I think from what we've heard from the applicant, there is information there was coming a bit late, but it potentially is there and could answer the question. But obviously from a council point of view, it's not available, hasn't been assessed. So just was interested to know if there is that position. So open up to discussion.
Sorry, I've sort of another question. I'm not sure how much of a planning issue it is, so we'll be told by the officers. But presumably there will be a charge for using the roller skating rink. I'm taking that as for granted. But what about entering the bit and using and looking at the big screen? Is it going to be a charge to enter the whole area, or is it just to use the roller skating rink?
Eden, are you aware? Okay, if we call the applicant again, please, to clarify.
The roller rink is £7, which includes skate hire. The site is free entry.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm glad you clarified that, because that was a big concern, that it was closing the whole area off to the public.
Okay, if no, councillor Clements?
Thank you. I just have a question regarding the licensing from 10 a.m. Is that a license to serve alcohol from 10 a.m.?
Miss Eden?
Yeah, that's what I've got from the licensing authority. But I see the applicant's indicating. I'm not sure.
Well,
But
I think
this is the information I've received.
yeah, I think that's the licensing term, so that would be what we rely on.
It's 10 till 10:30.
Is that regular?
I think it would be the same for the square and other. Any final questions before we move in? So if we move into discussion then, please. Oh. Yeah. Mike. Yep. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I really picking up on what Councillor Bartlett said about the purpose of the gardens. I've got 3 points. Well, firstly, the point about BNG, and I'm not an expert on BNG, as might have been alluded to, but I have done some training on BNG, and exemption, I think, for this area would actually probably apply because of the type of grass that's there. I am slightly concerned that the liquid amber tree was deemed to be of low value. It's not an indigenous tree, but where it's sited is, I think, quite important to the gardens, and the gardens are gardens that develop with obviously during Victorian times to have exotic species in there, and the liquid amber is one that provides certainly an interest, especially in the autumn. And is a thing of beauty in the autumn periods, and I think if you were to destroy the environment around it or to harm that tree, as a arboriculturalist, I'm sure they probably don't rate it very highly, but as a member of the public that likes looking at lovely trees in the autumn, I think it is one of the nicest trees to look at. I'm slightly disturbed that we set aside paragraph 34, the heritage asset, and I think Councillor Bartlett again mentioned to this about the purpose of the gardens, and the comment of the agreement with the Merrick Estate that it's for the purposes of residents, for sort of peaceful enjoyment, which is the sort of phrase that was bandied about in those times, to have a pleasant stroll through the centre of Bournemouth, where away from the hubbub and the noise and the streets and the buses, where for somebody who's worked in city centres across England, and even some overseas, that our gardens are very important spaces to get somewhere quiet during the day, to go eat your lunch, or to enjoy sort of recreation, peaceful recreation. So, and I think there's other opportunities. We've got other leisure facilities around Bournemouth, permanent installations. I think a comment was made about the Pavilion, the BIC. We've got the cinema that's been built next door, and the associated food establishments. So there's an impact on those food and drink outlets, which there are plenty of, and have full-time licenses. So I'm concerned about that. Secondly, and I did sort of allude to this in one of my questions about the reseeding and the long-term loss of amenity. Obviously, if during that period of this site coming in operation, the grass is going to effectively be destroyed, in my opinion, and I think reseeding is. I don't think turfing is necessarily going to be an option to not using it. So I'm very concerned about that. So I'm minded to refuse this on those bases. But yeah, I'm really sort of not happy with the sort of dismissal and the balance of the heritage asset statement on paragraph 34, or the objection by the heritage officer. I think that is very key to Bournemouth, and the whole culture of the central Bournemouth is based on having a gardens going through it. And if we effectively diminish that amenity by having our gardens taken away during the peak periods of the summer, I think we've lost a very key heritage asset in Bournemouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling. Councillor Clements.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I feel very torn on this, I have to say. Even if the BNG and the flood risk situations can be mitigated, and it would appear that perhaps they can. As Councillor Tarling has just said, the heritage aspect of the gardens being affected, it does concern me. Although, having said that, as somebody who has been in the gardens frequently during the summer, it's hardly peaceful and relaxing. It's full of people, very noisy, crowds, rushing around, enjoying themselves and having a lovely time and doing what they should be doing. My really main concern is that firstly, I think it's a bit of a shame that the roller skating rink is so little. It would have been nicer to have if it's being promoted as a roller skating rink, but it's kind of, I think it's a bit more than 10%, but it certainly looks like it's less than 50% of the area being used. But I do think that it's a wonderful thing for the town to have an outdoor experience, an outdoor tourism attraction. I do think it'll be good for the economy. I understand the comments about the businesses are already in situ, but this is an alternative kind of experience. And if we get some nice weather, it would be very lovely for our residents and our tourists to be able to have that type of experience. And let's face it, Bournemouth is on its knees. Our tourism and our economy, we need something. We have to promote our town and attract people to come here. We've had so much bad press recently, and personally, I think that outweighs all the other concerns, and it is only temporary.
Thank you, Councillor Clements. Any other councillors? Councillor Pavilion?
Like Councillor Clements, I'm very torn on this one. And we come back, in my mind, I'm coming back to the reseeding issue, which sounds comparatively minor, but if it's going to take 2 years to be restored, or up to 2 years, that means next summer we can't be agreeing to something like this. So this would be very much a one-off. I'm trying to square this in my mind, how that would pan out. And also the other thing I'm trying to square in my mind is the fact that we allow the ice rink in winter, which was extremely noisy. I can remember being with Councillor Clements at an event, and we walked across after, it must have been 10 o'clock at night or something, and the noise, the music coming from it was huge. So are we having dual standards? I'm not sure. I'm still open-minded.
Thank you. Councillor Canavan?
Chair, I would like to move that we support the recommendation in the agenda supplement and refuse this application on the grounds of the that are set out in the supplement. I think very careful consideration has been given to the grounds for refusal. And I think, although I have some sympathy with what Councillor Barrow has said, I think we need to stick with the recommendations from the officers. I think this additional information has come far too late. And I don't think there is any excuse for that. And I'm also not comfortable with, forgive me for using the expression kicking the can down the road. I'd be very uncomfortable about deferring the whole decision and leaving it in the hands of officers dependent on assessment of these things. I think we need to make a decision as a committee, and therefore I'm moving that we refuse the application on those grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Do I have a seconder for that refusal? Councillor Rice, do you want to speak as well?
Yes, I'd just like to say that in principle, I agree with having another sporting activity in the gardens, but either as a local or as a tourist, I would want to be coming to something that was going to be functional either for myself or for my kids. So I am very concerned about the size, and I'd prefer that it was something that once I'd experienced it, I wanted to come back to, as opposed to thinking, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting from an economy, sort of in terms of boosting the economy. The other thing I'm very concerned about is, and I think it's quite different from the ice rink in the wintertime, when you're not expecting people to be hanging around sitting on the grass. Last week when I was walking through Bournemouth Gardens, there was tons of people sitting having picnics, their own little bits of music, conversation, and there was a large football game going on as well. And that noise level going on until 10 o'clock at night is very different and interrupted when there is a large screen. It positioned so that the whole of that section can be seeing that screen, and it distracts away from natural play and natural conversation, and the noise I find is, although it hasn't been distinguished within planning terms, very concerning for the heritage of the gardens. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other speakers? Is it something new, Councillor Tarling?
It's to the motion, Chair. If I suggest to the proposer and to the seconder that we actually add in the response regarding heritage assets, like the seconder has mentioned about that additional grounds for refusal is impact on the heritage as detailed in the report.
Okay, are you happy with that proposed, Councillor Canavan, Councillor Rice? They're nodding. Any other, Councillor Adams?
Well, I'll be quick so we can all go on. But having listened to what everyone said, I was taking a couple of notes as we were talking, and they're actually remarkably similar to everything you just said a couple of minutes ago. I think that the town centre's on its knees. Let's try and do something different, and I'm a big believer in doing stuff that people might want to do. So I'm against the motion to refuse, but I'd still be happy to support anything with conditions on. But I just wanted to say that I agreed. So that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. I think obviously the timescale of this project, and we've heard that the Lower Gardens Trust only approved it towards the end of May, so it has been quite thing. So I think the learnings, if you can pass on to the tourism team or the events team, that just need to work smarter. I think Councillor Mr. Firth did give a fallback position of if we did. But as Councillor Canavan said, it is kicking the can down. We don't rely on the information here and then. It is relying that the officer would be taking it away. But I was similar, like Councillor Clements and Councillor Adams, for this proposal. But I can understand the argument. Councillor Salmon.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to add to I like Councillor Clements and Councillor Pavilion have both said, I'm also really torn on this, and I can see the positives and the negatives. The only thing I'd like to add, I think, is that the context of the very recent change in legislation around statutory BNG, meaning I would like to give this particular application that extra leniency if we could, because of that time, that how recent that is, and how, and I appreciate that, if this was something that everyone knew about and had been going on for years and years, you would say, well, sorry, you didn't get the information in time. But in the context of that, that's all I'd add in, I think.
It's useful. Thank you. Any other speakers? Are we ready to go to a vote? Ms. Holly?
Chair, can I just ask for clarification on the additional reason for refusal, the actual wording?
So Councillor Tarling or Councillor Canavan, it was just on the heritage.
Yeah, I can't actually find the reference to which policy it is, but it is mentioned in paragraph 34 about the harm to long-term damage to the trees and the comments made by the heritage officer. So, if somebody could point me to that policy, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Burridge.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, so just to be clear, the refusal reason would centre around the harm to the heritage asset and the loss of the tree.
Sorry, it's impact on the grass and the trees that's referenced in paragraph 34. Yeah.
Okay, the policy which would focus on the heritage assets would be policy CS 39 of the core strategy. We have policy 4.25, which specifically relates to trees, but I understand the concern more is the visual benefits of having the tree in that location, because the idea was always that the tree would be replaced. It wouldn't be that the tree was lost completely. But I think your refusal reason is focusing on the visual impact on the heritage asset. Am I correct?
That is correct. It's
Yes.
more reference to the listing and the what's the word? Not curtailment. Environs of the listing.
Okay.
I can't remember
And
the
obviously
planning term.
the officer in her report has set out conclusions on that, but I think you're probably siding more with the conclusions of the heritage officer. So if we're talking about the visual impact on the heritage asset, about introducing a roller skate park into that setting, then it would be policy CS 39 that we would be looking at.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, well, Councillor Rice, Democratic Services, got that. Okay, so are there any other speakers? So the proposal which has been seconded is for refusal as set out along with the heritage policy that is. So if I can ask, if you refuse for refusal, if you put your hands up now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And if you are against refusal now.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's everybody. So that is refused. Thank you for your participation. Councillor Bartlett, can I ask you to get the two councillors in, please?
I don't think they're coming.
We're Town Centre Square.
I thought they were out except for the D.
Square next.
Yeah. So we're now looking at the town centre of the square, Bournemouth, and Mr. Davies will be setting up for presenting this. Okay, I think we're there.
Sorry, hold on. Yes, this is the event that will take place hopefully in the square. It's similar to events that we have every year, and in fact they've got consent already for the events. There's a general consent that covers events in the whole of the town centre, and it includes Beale's Place and the Triangle and the Square. That consent is limited by the number of days that they can have the events. And the proposal this year, they've got a new theme for the square. So there's a new operator, and they want to operate it for a slightly longer period. They want to operate it for 51 days, as you can see, from in the middle of this week to the beginning of September. So the reason for the consent is really twofold. One, I suppose, is because there's a new theme, and secondly, because they want a longer period. The area that they're going to occupy is shown on the plan that you can see in your screen, and it's a much smaller area than they use for the winter market. You can see it's the area between the Camera Obscura and Richmond Hill, and also includes the pathway down towards the gardens. There's a photograph which helpfully shows the event last summer, or one of the previous summers, and you can see the sort of activities, and I'm sure all members have been around the square and know what's proposed. This is the proposed layout, and you can see there's a slightly different theme with it this year. They've got some table tennis tables. They've got a bus, an old London bus that they're going to sell sweets from, and there's the usual market stalls that you've got either side of the walkway through. This is a plan that shows where I think is probably the pinch point, which is the area down through towards the gardens, and you can see there that they're maintaining a gap of about 4 meters through. As I said before, this is a tried and tested operation. It happens every year. They will need to get a highway license to make sure that the way that they construct the operation and the way that they operate it and maintain the free flowing of pedestrians through the square is controlled by highways. And you can see that's part of the recommendation. We've made the point that they will need to apply and acquire a highway license. One of the key factors is that they must maintain an emergency access route through there, because if there's any emergency and you need a fire engine or an ambulance, then there's space for that to go through. And the plans that they've produced shows that emergency escape route can be provided. Here's some images of what it's going to look like. You can see it's a different theme to other years. It includes a 2-level bar area. You probably can't see it, but on the left-hand side were the table tennis tables. And here's the London bus that they're going to site there, which will sell sweets, I think, for children. There's an overall overview of it, and you can see there. Also within there, there's a stage in the middle of the screen there, which they'll have live music. In terms of noise nuisance, they have provided in the past and will have to sign up to make sure that they don't cause any serious nuisance. So, but the events that will take in place are similar to other years. This is the area. This photograph of the area that runs through towards the lower gardens, and you can see from the plan beforehand there are two kiosks there, kiosks 4 and 5, and they will go either side, so there'll still be a 3.7 meter gap through to the gardens. This is the view from the square as it is when it's open, and again the emergency access route will be provided right through the middle of the site. Obviously, in terms of the proposal, it's similar to the last item that you were debating. Although in this case there's no issue with biodiversity net gain because there's no biodiversity there at the moment. And in any way, in any event, that the size of it would mean that it's probably exempt from the legislation. So, Chair, that's the proposal. Just to recap again, they've already got consent for the use that they're proposing. It's just they want a couple of weeks longer to extend, include the whole of the school holidays. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. And just on that point, so who gave that permission for the existing, and then you're just looking for extension? That's delegated, was it?
Yes, I mean that we've probably given consent, temporary consents now for the last 15 years in the square, probably at least. I think, from memory. So, but the first one was, was given on a first. It used to be on an annual consent, but we renewed it under the scheme of delegation. I think it was 2020, was it last year, 21 or 21, 23, but they've got a few years left of their consent anyway.
Okay, thanks for confirming that. I believe there's no speakers on this one.
No, there's no speakers registered for this item.
Thank you for confirming. So if we go straight into member questions then, please. Any questions? Councillor Williams?
Well, it's not so much a question, more of a statement, really. It seems to me it's been running successfully for 15 years. 2 weeks is not going to impact on people's lives too much. And to me, it sounds a no-brainer. I propose we go for it.
Okay, it's a bit premature, but if there are no other questions, Councillor Adams?
Happy to second.
Okay.
There's nothing other more than leave.
Right. Okay. Any other points to raise? Councillor Tarling?
Yeah, I'm very keen to get this over and done with as two fellow councillors opposite. There was a bit of a discrepancy between what we've shown as in the which chalets and this restriction access from the gardens. Generally speaking, the fact it's been operating for a few years, I think is the key thing. The only negative thing for me is this loss of circulation space and the highways aspect. And I am concerned about people crossing, obviously, the gardens from the gardens through into the square. And at busy times, that 4 meters is actually quite narrow to get a lot of people through. And I'm happy that it's delegated to the Highways Authority to oversee and manage that. And I'd actually say it looks like more than 4 meters on the images. So, I mean, if the office could skip back to that. Is there actually an image showing that area in operation? Because, I mean, there isn't.
So if it was
what was that one showing the other dimensions? All right, so yeah, that one. I mean, that's my only concern is the fact the width of the pedestrian crossing with the 2 bollards in the middle is set that width based on pedestrian flows that we anticipate as being a maximum, yet immediately after you have crossed over the road into the square, you're faced with a constriction there. Maybe it's just because I'm a grumpy old man and I hate people getting in my way as I'm walking around town. But I'm quite a tall, grumpy old man, so I don't have to bump into people. I can get people out of my way quite quickly. But yeah, I'm worried that, with people with wheelchairs, pushchairs and the like, that's a very narrow gap. I don't know, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here. I am I? Thank you, Councillor Adams. But that's my only reservation about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, the only point I would make about that is that this consent they're applying for this year is just purely for this year. So if there are issues that arise out of it, then it can be reviewed next year.
Thanks for clarifying. Councillor Clements?
Yeah, I am inclined to agree with Councillor Tarling, actually. I'm not a grumpy old man. But yeah, I can see possibly a safety issue there, to be honest. And it might be a bit of a daft question, but do those huts have to be positioned there? Is there nowhere else they could go?
Mr. Davies?
They could go elsewhere, Chair, but you can see that the space, this consent, this red line, is a much smaller area than the winter market. So they are trying to keep it into a fairly restricted area. I would imagine that it's quite important to them to have that area that goes through to the gardens. And if you're slowing down because it's busy, then you might buy a pair of sunglasses or whatever it is in the kiosk either side. But it's in terms of highway safety matters, the 3.7 metres is being provided, and that's what the highways people think is safe.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Councillor Adams.
I don't know if it helps, but over the Christmas period, they have them in a very similar position. And one of them was the hot chocolate one, which was very busy. And there was one that sold, I can't remember what it was, but I like the hot chocolate one. But it really wasn't an issue in my, I know summer's a different season, but I managed to stumble through just fine after a hot chocolate.
Okay, Councillor Pedovan.
It's gone. Could you put the slide back that we just had up? That one, yes. Comparing the blue for the chalets on that one with the other one, the more picture one. No, not that one. That one. Though on that one, they extend much nearer to the road and therefore constrict the entrance more because it's tapered, whereas the blue ones on the other picture are set further back. So which indicates the size of them? Are they as big as that, or are they smaller like the blue ones?
Chair, yes, the drawing they've submitted there is diagrammatic.
Yeah.
Because of course these are only temporary structures. You don't need to put foundations in. They're just cited
But
there.
if it's more like the blue ones, they're set back and therefore the opening is wider. There's more pedestrian area left.
Chair, yes, the drawing you can see in front of you, the orange area only shows the area that they're seeking consent for. Within that, they've shown 5 and 6. I think that's a diagrammatic of the of where the containers are going to go, where the units are going to go. But that's not to scale. This drawing here is the one that's more clearly represents the space that's available.
Right, and they indicate they're on the wider bit of the tapering.
Yes.
Which and therefore leave more pedestrian access.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I said right at the beginning, this is just an extension. We don't really need to debate where everything's put because it's already going to be there. So I again reiterate, I don't think it's anything but a no-brainer.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask if the officer could confirm whether this is exactly the same as what has been granted in previous applications. You know, has there always been a 4 metre gap there? I mean, to me, the way that the those kiosks are positioned is fine because there looks a big distance between the end of the kiosk and the curbside, which is, if I got it right, 7.5 metre wide.
Yes, that's right.
So any squashing up is going to be after pedestrians have crossed the road from the gardens onto the square.
Chair, yes, this is a new proposal, as I said earlier on. So I'm not sure what it was like in previous years. So this is a new proposal, but the important factor is that they are saying that they've got a 3.7 metre wide gap, which is what the Highway Authority feel is sufficient for clear movement.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Clements.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sorry to keep banging on about this, but in my mind, this is the summer tourist season. There are going to be a lot of children around, and I am concerned about the safety aspect of the visibility being, affected from somebody you know, with young children, if you know, you're not going to have a lot of time, are you? If you can't see your child and they get away, maybe I'm being a bit over dramatic here. I don't know, but from a safety aspect, is there anybody here from Highways that can reassure me?
Could I ask them to step to the table just about the highways license? What's that's going to entail? Do you want to come to the speaker, please?
Roger. Alexa Edwards, Transport Development Manager. So your questions about the highway licence?
Yeah, so just Councillor Clements.
Yeah, my concern is that those two huts there that are on the approach to the road, they're obviously going to restrict the access to make it narrower, but they're also, in my opinion, going to cause a visual obstruction. So I'm concerned that, you know, there are going to be a lot of young children around. Any parent with young children, it's going to be busy. Is there visibility from, you know, the other side of the hut towards the road? Are you satisfied that that's going to be sufficient and safe?
Right, okay. So the highway licence is to allow somebody to have a structure on the public highway. The square is public highway, and as the highway authority, we must licence that activity. That has nothing to do with the planning side of thing or the visual amenity concerns, whatever. It's just making sure that the activity is something that we would accept and can be removed should a utility company wish to come in there and do something with any of their equipment. In terms of the actual planning application, obviously there's a long history here, much to the highway authority's previous concerns. The 3.75 minimum, we consider that as a minimum level to allow people to pass, but the position here would allow people to be able to see the buses moving through Jervis Place, but it is not ideal. Ideally, we would like to see a greater distance, but that's not what we're looking at here with this application.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Any final points before we go to a vote? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we should go to a vote. So the vote is vote for if agree the application as set out, proposed by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Adams. So if you're in favour for approval, vote now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
If you are for refusal, vote now.
None.
And abstention.
1.
So that is carried, that is approved. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Are you staying for the next one? So the next one is Pavilion Theatre, Westover Road. So Councillors Williams and Gillett, are you actually leaving for good now, or? Right, okay, leaving for this one. Okay, Mr. Davies. Yes, we should just have a 2 minutes, so if you can pause the feed, thank you. Okay, we're back live, so we're going to be looking at the application 6C Pavilion Theatre, Westover Road. So, Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is similar issues to the previous two schemes, actually. I'll just fill you in with a bit of background. This is an application for use of the terrace in front of the pavilion, or the between the on the southern elevation of the pavilion, again to use it as a seasonal event space. Similar to the other applications, it's something that's happened in the past. But whereas the previous consent, they had consent, previous proposal, they had consent, this has been operating under the 28-day rule, where you're able to have a temporary event for 28 days only. Last year we approved, again under delegated powers, there was a winter event there when they had ski chalets and ski booths. Again, that was more than the 28 days, and we gave them consent for that. Also on this site, and you can see from that image, it's the site of the upside down house that's been approved again under delegated powers by officers for the past 3 years. We've actually said to them that that we're not going to renew the upside down house, so that will be gone. The proposal, if I can probably find the best image for you. That's probably the best image, because it is retrospective. They have installed it at the moment. It's probably not unauthorized, because they can put it up for 28 days without needing consent. But you can see the application before you is for a longer period. They want it for the whole of the summer period. The main issue here, compared with the square, is that there's two significant heritage assets to consider. One is the pavilion itself, which is a Grade 2 listed building, a very important building to us. And the other issue, the other asset is the gardens. The proposal doesn't affect those buildings physically or the gardens physically, but it does affect the setting of the building and the gardens, because you can quite clearly see the structures that are there in front of the pavilion and from the gardens. So, Chair, that's what I consider to be the main issue, the impact on the heritage asset. In the previous discussions, we've heard about biodiversity, net gain, and flooding. That doesn't apply here because of the level of well above the stream, and again, as it's all hard standing, there's no area of biodiversity that's being impacted. As you can see from the report, the heritage officer has got concerns that they think that the porta cabins that are proposed and the other structures affects the setting of the gardens and the pavilion building itself. I don't disagree with that. But I think the other factor in my balancing of the planning issues is to take account of the tourist benefits as well. And I think that the pavilion itself, or the Pavilion Terrace, historically was used for this sort of use. Going back, 100 years, people have always sat down there and had refreshments. Before, they would have had all of the catering taking place within the pavilion itself, but that lower part of the pavilion has now been converted into Pavilion Dance Southwest. So they now need these catering units on the outside of the site. We did have some reservations about the original submission, particularly as one of the units was located and is still located now, actually, in front of one of the windows in front of the pavilion. And I don't think it's that clear from that drawing, but if you look in that area there, just below that window, you can see there's a catering unit there. And we've said to the applicant that we don't consider that as acceptable, because it blocks one of the windows of the pavilion, albeit for a short-term period. As I said earlier, the upside down house is going. So what we've said as part of our recommendation is that we're satisfied with the use, but we want you to rearrange the buildings and the structures on the site. And if I can just show you that drawing there, you can see that shows where the upside down house is. But the proposal, if you can see for future years, will be to put the catering units, or two of the catering units, where the upside down house is. We think that part of the site is less sensitive because it's next door to the flyover. So what we're saying is that we're happy with the use, not happy with the layout as it stands, but we put a condition on that they revert to the layout as shown on that drawing for future years. So I think, Chair, in a nutshell, that is the issue that members need to consider.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Davies. Sinead, is there any speakers on this?
No, Chair, we have no registered speakers on this item.
Okay, thanks for confirming. So we'll go straight into questions then, Councillor Canavan.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, if I may. Is it open to us as a committee to change the 5-year period? I recognise that's what's in the application, but are we able to? I mean, do we have the power to limit it if we wanted to? That's the first part of the question. And the other is, in the discussions with whoever operates this thing, when you've been talking about the location of the containers and so on, has there been any discussion, or can any thought be given, maybe not this time, but next time, for the nature of those structures? I think those shipping containers are awful. We've seen, haven't we, in the square, that it is possible actually to have some fairly attractive structures, albeit temporarily. But these things seem to me to be quite obtrusive. So that's my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in terms of the period, if members felt that 5 years was too long, then they could put an alternative period on there, 2 or 3 years. The reason that we've extended it to 5 years. Normally, in the past, we've given 2 or 3 years, but if members are generally happy with it, then I thought 5 years was a more appropriate period. But if members felt that that was too long a period and they'd like to review it after 2 or 3 years, then we can modify that condition. With regard to the containers, when they were first put up there, they were metal containers, and we said they don't look very attractive. They have made an effort, and they've now clad them in timber. And you can see on the left-hand side of that photograph is one of the units that they have clad with timber. And I think that's it's a much nicer appearance than a metal container, and it's got a similar feel to it to the other kiosks, more permanent kiosks in the gardens. Yes, if members felt that they wanted a different cladding scheme, then they could add a condition on that they, notwithstanding the details shown, that a different type of unit should be provided. One thing I would say about that is that I did discuss with the applicant, and there are some issues with doing something else. If they had a wholly timber like summer house type of affair, there would be issues with health and safety and fire and damage and vandalism. So I think that the shipping containers are the standard type of unit that they feel is safe and secure. And by cladding it with timber cladding, that's the optimum arrangement, I think.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Are you happy with that, Mr. Councillor Cameron? Councillor Tarling.
Yes, thank you very much. You made a statement about the container that's in front of the window. I noticed we are asked to grant consent for a scheme which doesn't show that container in front of the window, but that container is currently there. Is it unreasonable to expect that upon grant of, well, sorry, my question is, when their current permission expires, and obviously they don't have permission for this container at the window, the requirement to move it, is that unreasonable to ask them to move it? Is it possible to be moved, or are we expected to pay it no regard?
The plan that we're approving shows that there is no structure in front of that window. It's going to be moved to where the upside down house is. For practical reasons, it would probably be difficult to get them to move it immediately, because there's no alternative place for it to go to because the upside down house is there. And secondly, because of the timescales and the disruption, because it is up and running. And remember that they can actually operate this for 28 days. So we're only talking about a period of a couple of weeks where it would be potentially unauthorized. And for in terms of planning enforcement, that it wouldn't be appropriate to deal with it that way.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, I've looked through the agenda item, couldn't see any dates with regards to when the upside down house was going to be removed. Is the officer able to furnish us with any dates at all, please?
After Christmas this year. So beginning of 2025, it has to go.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So any final questions? Okay, so we're going to debate then. Any openers? Councillor Tarling.
Thank you. Just a very slight debate, and I'm happy to propose a motion. Picking up on the appearance and timber cladding, I would. We've had exactly the same discussions with you regards to some of the beach things, and for me, I like the timber cladding, as you can see on that photo on the left. It's far less obtrusive than that massive fish and chips metal sign. However, we could then put, the applicant then may wish to put advertising on the side that says fish and chips and cut out that logo and put it on the front, which again might take back from that. Other schemes that we've seen, we've seen sort of fencing or sort of fenestration that detracts from the visual impact, and I think Councillor Canavan made a very good point about certainly this photo doesn't lend it any favours sitting right in front of the pavilion sign there. I would be minded, and I'd like to hear that we set a condition that there's a homogeneous approach to the cladding and the outside of this, and that we condition that it's delegated to the head of planning to approve an external scheme. I don't really want to say timber. I don't want to say rusty old metal or anything like that. But I'd be happy to delegate that to head of planning to approve an external scheme that is approved. So I'm going to hold off just motioning that because I want to hear other councillors' views on that. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Tarling, I think you did say that was a proposal. I think we
didn't quite get there.
Well, I thought people did say
okay,
that.
Fine. I'll propose the motion that we approve, but that a condition be added that delegated to the head of planning to approve an external cladding scheme for the containers.
So Mr. Burridge has got an
I'll
update
second
on
that.
layout. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just looking at condition 4 and listening to the comments that we've heard, I think we'd just like to suggest that the condition is just amended slightly so that it does include the appearance and the location. And there's, I think it just needs tidying up. So if we could, we'd suggest something along the lines of prior to the use recommencing in 2025, and notwithstanding the details shown on the submitted drawings, details of the design, appearance, cladding materials, layout and location of all structures and ancillary equipment shall be submitted to and agreed in writing with the council. The agreed details shall be implemented and maintained throughout that period. So if we could, if you're minded to go with a recommendation to grant permission, if we could just delegate authority to the head of planning just to make those changes to that condition.
And there was an additional condition on lighting, wasn't there, in the updating papers? So if you're happy with that, Councillor Starling.
What
Yeah, Chair.
Absolutely, thank you.
Chair, can I just make one point? Obviously, the cladding that's there at the moment is an improvement from what was there before, and it'd be good to get some idea of sort of clarity about the sort of thing. One of the things that I would that they could do, and one of the important views is the view you're looking in that photograph is from the gardens, and they have suggested that there's an opportunity perhaps to put some planting there, and I think perhaps planting might be a better option, a better way of softening the impact of it. So adding the word planting landscaping into that modified condition, I think would be helpful.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Tarling?
Yeah, I think if you keep asking councillors what they what like there, we'll all come up with, how many of us, 10 different solutions of what they'd like. And I think the truth of the matter is, taking what Councillor Canavan said and what I've said, I think we sort of got the general gist of what's required. It could be timber, it could be planting, it could be a combination of the both. It might not be cladding, it could be a fence or a screen, temporary screen put up, which you could do with posts and kentledge rather than having to drill into the pavilion building. There's lots of ways to do it, but it just needs a bit of tidying up, and we're happy to delegate that to the head of planning to approve that.
Okay, thank you.
If I haven't got a second yet, have I?
So I think the answer is indeed just delegate power to the head of, I think it's head of planning operations is his correct title, but just to note that, but delegate power to tweak that wording of the condition to pick up that range of things which will need to be considered and approved by officers. I think if that's members happy to incorporate that in the resolution, that's what we'll do. We'll change the condition to cover all those options and give power to the head of planning operations to make the final decision as to what it should look like.
Yeah, and I don't mind the timber on the left. I think that's fine. But beyond that, I'll let the.
Okay, so we've got a proposal. Councillor Clements.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just really want to reiterate what's already been said. And quite honestly, I think this is terribly disappointing. And I think we deserve better than this in our town. It looks like it's just been thrown together with very little thought or imagination or creativity. You've got the beautiful pavilion building, you've got the beautiful gardens, and then you've got that horrible mess in between. And I really feel very strongly that we need to do much better than this.
But were you seconding it? With,
oh yeah, I second it as well.
Thank
you.
And Councillor Canavan. Councillor Rice.
I would like to highlight the soft plastic advertising on the railings that just have a huge impact on it in terms of what it looks like and how attractive it is and the amenity from the gardens.
Chair, yes, we've put an informative note on to remind them that they need separate advert consent for the banners and everything. So that's not included within this application that we're considering, but we have reminded them that they do need separate consent for that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. It's obviously in the paper, the applicant is BH Live, so the money goes back into the pavilion, which is a good cause. So any final points? No, we'll go to the vote then. So the proposal is to approve as set out. So if you want to approve, if you go for 4 now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's unanimous.
Okay, that is approved then. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Thank you, Rebecca.
Councillor Williams.
So the last item today will be 6D, 41 Thistle Barrow Road, Bournemouth. Who's presenting on that?
Tom Hubbard online.
Mr. Hubbard online. So just a couple of moments when some councillors coming back. So just to confirm, Councillor Williams will be sitting in the audience outside of the committee. And Councillor Gillett is back. So over to you, Ms. Hubbard.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this application is at 41 Thistle Barrow Road, and it relates to a change of use from a dwelling house to a 6-bedroom house in multiple occupation. There's been a number of local objections to this proposal, and it's also subject to a ward member call-in. I'd also like to update members that on Friday we received a petition from local residents in Thistle Barrow Road. It has approximately 34 signatures from 24 addresses, all in Thistle Barrow Road. No planning issues were raised in any sort of covering letter with that, but it is submitted in objection to the proposals. So this is the site here. It's in Thistle Barrow Road, which is a road that loops around off Little Down Avenue here. The site backs onto the AFC Bournemouth football stadium, and then you've got Kings Park beyond that. The Wessex Way is off to the top here, and this is the end of Holdenhurst Road, just so you can sort of get your bearings where the site is. And this aerial photo shows the context of the site. The area mostly contains these large detached dwellings. There's also been some later infill development that you can see off to the side here. This is the application property. You can see it is a large detached dwelling. It's got some accommodation in the roof with these dormer windows. You can also see that there is off-street parking capacity for a number of vehicles on the site. So some views up and down the street, in this case from the west, looking towards the application site here. And then from the east, there again, you can see the pattern of detached houses. In terms of parking, the road is subject to some daytime parking restrictions between certain hours on weekdays. Existing floor plans. The existing house has 5 bedrooms on the upper floors, including 2 in the roof. There's a number of ground floor living and reception rooms. There is an existing detached garage. When I was looking at this application, I'm not quite sure why the description of development references formation of a garage, because it is already there, but it is going to be converted for cycle storage, as you can see there on the proposed floor plans. So on the proposed plans, we've got 6 bedrooms, including 2 on the ground floor, and the 1 in the roof converted from what was 2. These bedrooms are all of pretty good size. And then you've got some communal space, including a shared kitchen and dining area. The upper floor bedrooms have all got ensuite bathroom facilities, and there are other communal bathrooms on the first floor, and there's a toilet on the ground floor. So yeah, we've got the garage has got some cycle storage, and then there's also an additional small cycle store at the front, tucked in the corner there, behind some hedging. And the bins are shown to be located at the side of the property here. There's no other physical changes proposed as part of the application. Just a plan showing the front cycle store. It's just over 1 metre high, basically a little storage box for a couple of cycles. Due to its compact size, it's not going to be very intrusive to the street scene. So the main element of the proposals is the change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a C4 small house in multiple occupation for up to 6 occupants. As members will be aware, the council has got an Article 4 direction in the Bournemouth area to prevent a change of use of dwellings to C4 HMO uses. And the reason for the introduction of the Article 4 direction was to prevent an over-concentration of HMO uses in certain areas, because they were seen to be having a detrimental impact on some of these areas of town. A related development plan policy was therefore introduced in the Bournemouth Core Strategy. That's policy CS24. That policy CS24 looks at a defined area around an application site, sort of 100 metres in each direction, and it seeks to ensure that no more than 10% of properties in that area are in HMO use to prevent that over concentration from occurring. It's deemed that 10% is the figure at which the community begins to become more sort of unbalanced. But small levels or individual HMO uses are deemed acceptable. So in this case, the report states there is one other potential HMO property in the area. And when I looked into that again, I believe that may in fact be an error, because it doesn't actually appear on the council's HMO register as an HMO, but it's actually listed as an address of a licensee of an HMO. So either way, if it's 0 or 1, the percentage in this case is well below 10%, and therefore the proposal is acceptable in terms of that policy CS24. The main reasons given in a lot of the objections and sort of councillor call-in are that the proposal would be out of character and would set a precedent because there's no other HMOs in that area, and also that it will create parking problems. So on that first point, it's clear that a change of use to a C4 HMO would ordinarily be permitted development were it not for the Article 4 direction. And the related policy, CS24, aims to limit an over-concentration of HMO uses rather than preventing individual HMO uses. So in other words, there isn't a policy basis to resist the change of use in this case. And then similarly, in terms of parking, the adopted parking standards require a single parking space for a C4 HMO use. And as you've seen in the photos, the application property has space on site for multiple vehicles. The application is therefore acceptable in this regard, and it also provides the required cycle storage to serve the use as well. So overall, it's considered that a HMO use on this site would be acceptable as proposed, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howard. Sinead, could you tell the speakers for this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on this application as an objector is Raymond Allen, if you wanted to come up. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We, the residents of Thistle Barrow Road, are deeply concerned about the conversion of residential house 41 Thistle Barrow Road into an HMO. The change could disrupt the tranquility of our community, but also possesses potential risks to safety and well-being of the families in the neighbourhood. The proliferation of HMOs can lead to increased noise and pollution and antisocial behaviour, parking issues, and strain on local resources, and it can potentially decrease the value of the properties. As residents, we value the peace and security that comes with living in a family-orientated community like ours in Thistle Barrow Road. We urge the local authority to reconsider granting planning permission for turning this into an HMO. This is not in keeping with the area.
We're not against providing housing solutions where needed. However, this should not be at the expense of existing residents' quality of life and preserve our neighbourhood's character by maintaining its primary purpose as a place for families. With 6 proposed units, this could possibly be 6 to 12 persons, which in turn could be 6 vehicles or 12 vehicles, depending on, it could be cars, vans, all sorts of things, which would cause parking problems. There's space for 3 vehicles on the drive, not 6, or up to 12, who knows? And of course, this will create more pollution and noise, with young children living next door and across the road, and elderly residents who are more vulnerable to pollution, with medical problems, extra strain on services, more bins, a larger bin. If it's a larger bin, it needs a different lorry to collect it, which is more pollution, an extra cost to BCP. Also more rubbish and more vermin, rats and mice and foxes, which are already there. Also more, there've been vermin there already at this property. And obviously with infrastructure, I mean, you get 6 units, possibly 6 toilets flushing at the same time into one 4-inch drain or 100mm drain. You're going to get blockages. We've already got blockages with one family living there. So that could cause a lot of problems. And obviously over there, we've been there 35 years, and the level of maintenance on the building has been very poor over the years. And if this is turned into an HMO, I wouldn't like to be one of the residents living there, because I think that's, as I say, it's been poorly maintained over the years. So it wouldn't probably increase. Actually, there's a bit more to the objections, which didn't come through, unfortunately. There's another 10 houses that the other person has got an objection on. So in fact, there's a total of 34 residential houses against this scheme out of 48. So I think it's over 70% of the dwellings in Thistle Barrow Road are against this. As opposed to the garage, I mean, that's another, we've got, I presume they would have to have planning permission to, there's an asbestos roof on there, which obviously would need to be done properly. And I think that we couldn't get to there's one definite against, which was a person who already has an HMO, which I think and the others we couldn't actually get because there were some people on holiday or abroad. So that's all I can say, I think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allen. Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. And in support of the applicant, we've got Matt Annan. If you'd like to come up and speak, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Matt Annan, Chartered Town Planner and Director of Pure Town Planning, and I'm here speaking in support of the applicant. Unfortunately, the applicant couldn't be here today, but she wishes to express her gratitude to the members of the Planning Committee for taking the time to review the proposal and determine this application. To recap, my client's application seeks planning permission to convert the existing C3 residential dwelling house into a C4 HMO for up to 6 people with associated works, including the formation of cycle store and bin stores. The application has been recommended for approval by your officers, and I wish to outline the main considerations why I feel members should support the scheme in line with the recommendation. Firstly, the principle of development. Typically, a change of use from C3 to C4 would be permitted development. However, in Bournemouth, planning permission is required for this type of development due to the Article 4 direction, which came into force in 2011. The purpose of the Article 4 direction was to prevent an over-concentration of HMO properties in residential areas, an issue which is common in university towns and coastal towns and could cause tensions to existing residents and unbalanced communities if the mix of housing is not properly managed by the council, limiting the number of additional HMOs in an area already saturated by them. Policy CS24 of the Bournemouth Core Strategy deals with HMOs. It states that changes can only be permitted where no more than 10% of dwellings in the area adjacent to the application property are within use at C4 or sui generis use. As you have heard, when assessing the proposal in line with this policy, the Council's public register of licensed HMO shows that there is only one property, possibly zero, but one maximum, out of 73 residential properties within the 100 metres radius of the application site that fall within an HMO use. Thus, the proposal would increase this number to 2, but that would only represent a 2.7% of the area's housing stock in HMO. This is comfortably below the 10% limit imposed by the policy CS24. Accordingly, the proposal is in full compliance with the development plan. Secondly, neighbouring amenity. A small number of local residents have expressed concerns that the proposal would harm neighbouring amenity. This would not be the case. The proposed HMO would be finished to a high standard, which would include external renovation, including repainting and landscaping improvements. The HMO would be marketed at local working professionals looking for short-term accommodation, including staff at the nearby JP Morgan offices. The HMO would not be a student-let. Littledown is not an area known for its popularity with the area's student population, as is evidenced by the lack of existing HMOs who tend to live within the town centre and adjoining areas such as Winton and Charminster. The existing property is a large 5-bedroom detached residential dwelling, and the coming and going of the 6 occupants of the proposed HMO development would not result in a materially harmful degree of noise and disturbance to its neighbouring occupiers when compared to the existing use. Members are reminded that if borough-wide Article 4 direction was not in place, for example, if this property was in Poole or Christchurch, this type of proposal would ordinarily constitute permitted development. In conclusion, councillors, the development would help the council to meet its housing needs by contributing to a mix of housing types, including the need to provide HMO accommodation for workers seeking short and longer term accommodation. As evidenced in the officer's report, this can be achieved without causing harm to the character and appearance of the area or neighbouring amenities. Accordingly, I hope you agree with your officer's recommendation to grant permission and vote in favour of approving this proposal today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Annan. And lastly, Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. We've got Councillor Lawrence Williams speaking as a ward councillor on this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members, for letting me speak this morning. Both Councillor Dove and I are strongly against this application. With 6 or more residents, it's undoubtedly a cause of more pressure on parking. Indeed, around the corner in Littledown Avenue, there is a house with multiple occupants, which causes no end of trouble for us, with upwards of 12 cars at any one time, sometimes more. I believe that the proposal would be not in keeping with the character of the street and the surrounding houses. We don't need a hostel in the middle of a housing estate of a large 4-bedroom family houses. It is, as I've already said, a threat to other roads close by, setting a precedent for the whole area. I'm objecting both as a resident, I live around the corner, close by, and the ward councillor. Thistle Barrow Road is a quiet street with family houses, and as such there are no other HMOs other than the unofficial one I mentioned. I'm concerned about the impact on the character of the street and this very family orientated area, as well as potential parking issues. The area does have parking issues, as you may know, due to JP Morgan being quite close by. The road already has challenges being close to AFC Bournemouth too, and this gives residents a break would be what I ask. The people living in Thistle Barrow feel strongly. They have a petition, as you've heard, and I've got the remainder of it here, which shows the solidarity of the neighbourhood, and the petition shows the strength of objection from residents of Thistle Barrow Road and beyond. I would urge you, councillors, to please reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So, Mr. Hubbard, obviously a couple of points from raised about asbestos roof and resident safety. Are there any other points you want to mention on those points, or please?
Thank you, Chair. As you can see from the plans, the existing garage is retained as it is. There isn't any plan showing it's being replaced, so we have to assume that it's staying as it is. If they do replace the roof, that would generally be within the realms of sort of general repair and maintenance if it's replaced like for like, and that would be subject to sort of other legislation about asbestos handling and removal. In terms of some of the other points raised, I think there have been comments about sort of how many people will be living here. Could it be more than 6? Could it be 12? In fact, the applicant has applied for a C4 use, which is for between 3 and 6 occupants. So if they were sort of materially more than 6, that would be a further change of use to a larger HMO, which is outside of that C4 use category. It's a sui generis use, which would need further consent. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate that update. So open for questions, Councillor Gillett.
So one of the other issues that was brought up was the drainage. I don't know if some of these larger houses in the area have drainage which was designed for former times probably. I couldn't see anything in the report that sort of related to drainage, apart from a couple of things on the image. Are there any conditions that you feel we should consider around that?
Mr. Hubbard?
Well, yeah, again, this goes back to the fact that the Article 4 direction removes permitted development rights, but this is ordinarily a change of use from C3 to C4. It would ordinarily be permitted development, and therefore you have to assume that the government consider that the intensity of the use is broadly similar to the family house. I mean, in this case, it is an existing 5 or 6 bedroom house. You could have a large family living there with a tenant as well, and it would have the same level of activity as is proposed here. There's no other physical changes proposed, so the drainage is not really considered to be a planning consideration in this case.
Councillor Gillett, no,
One more question here. So I've got one more question as well, but it might not. Yeah. So looking at the Article 4, and understand that means that I can see that means that there's no precedent set because you've got the CF24 and the 10% rule, but I couldn't find an equivalent of CF24 within the new plan. So does that mean that actually we might be inadvertently setting a precedent because obviously we're dealing with the old plan there?
Yeah, Mr. Burridge, are you up to date on the new local plan?
Yeah, I'm not as up to date as I should be, I'm afraid, no. I mean, all I would say at the moment is that we're obviously assessing the application against the current local plan, and that's the material consideration. So the future local plan, I'm not sure about the CS24 and how that's carried through. I could have a quick look, but that at the moment would carry very, very limited weight because it's not the adopted local plan.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Clements?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At the beginning of the presentation, the planning officer said that an HMO in a locality can have a detrimental impact on the neighbourhood. Could he elaborate on that? I just wondered what that might be.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yeah, sorry, I can't remember exactly what I said on that. I think in the presentation I was trying to make it clear that the local policy it doesn't discourage individual HMOs. It's more about when you get a cluster of HMOs and you get an overconcentration, that's when the issues begin to occur. Obviously, I mean, looking at the background to policy CS24, it says, for example, policy, paragraph 4.3.24, the contribution that shared housing in the form of houses in multiple occupation makes to the borough's housing stock is recognised. A range of groups in society rely on HMOs for their housing needs, for example, students, young professionals, or those who cannot afford rent or mortgage on a flat or a house. However, high concentrations of HMOs in particular parts of the town have led to negative impacts on the amenities of local residents. So it's clear that it's more where you get those clusters in areas such as Winton, which is near the university, for example, which led to that policy coming in. Individual HMO uses are generally, unless they're sort of badly managed, in which case that would be covered by other areas such as environmental health or the HMO licensing, but otherwise they are sort of valid forms of housing that contribute towards our housing need.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Pavilion?
My question is about conditions for potential residents. Mr. Howard mentioned the fact that the upstairs rooms are en suite. The two downstairs rooms, for some reason, are not. And I can't see any reason why not, because the rooms are, if anything, bigger than the equivalent above them, because they've got bay windows. So it seems to me there's a potential to have put en suites in there. And the fact that there isn't an ensuite to those two rooms means that conditions for anyone living in those rooms are of a lesser quality, because they've got a downstairs toilet, but to use a bath or shower, they'd have to go to the upstairs bathroom, which is very normal in a family house. But for an HMO, when there is the apparently space and drainage to put in an ensuite, I wonder whether there's any sort of guidelines on that.
Mr. Hubbard?
I don't think it would be a planning reason to refuse the application. There are separate HMO licensing standards, and I would assume that the applicant has looked at those and considered whether it meets those sort of amenity standards in the HMO licensing rules. I don't think there's any sort of planning policy grounds that we could resist it on those bedrooms not having ensuite bathrooms.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Burridge?
Thank you, Chair. So I was just to clarify on the last point. I've just had a quick look, and in the consultation draft, that's March 24, the future local plan, we have policy H8, which is houses in multiple occupation, and that does refer, it retains the 10% of residential properties within a 100-mile radius being used in HMO. So 100 meters. So that provision is, as it stands, still in, yes, is the same.
Thank you. And Mr. Burridge, just on the points about illegal parking and excess noise, would that be the same fallback as any other residential property that the environmental health and the traffic teams will be involved there, or is there any other involvement? Thank you. Right. Sorry, Mr. Harrow. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yes, that's correct. So in terms of parking, there are some on-street parking restrictions, as I said, during certain times of the day. I think that's to prevent sort of JP Morgan employees parking there all day. But it's clear that there is a good amount of on-site parking in this case, and it exceeds the requirement of our policy parking standards, which is for just one space. I'm sorry, I can't recall what the other sort of area you wanted me to.
Yeah, it's about noise and pollution and mess. So that's environmental health remit.
Yes, broadly, if like I said, if it's sort of a really badly managed property, it would be the same as any other property where, yeah, environmental health and other areas would get involved. Yeah.
And what powers do they have? Would they have powers to revoke the C4 class, or can it go that far?
I'm not sure on that. I mean, obviously the HMOs have a license, but that's separate to planning. We're purely looking at the principle of the use rather than how it's managed. Okay, thank you for that. So if there's no final questions, we go into debate then. No, Councillor Canavan.
Well, in the absence of anybody else having a go, I guess it's my turn. The main problem with HMOs is that there is no enforcement. I represent a ward where there are significant numbers of HMOs, and we have constant problems with the condition and the behaviour of residents in those properties. And I think if you're saying, oh, these are young professionals and students, that is naive in my judgment. So I'm aware of houses of multiple occupation that have existed without a license, and also in a situation where, you know, we have just failed to apply any kind of enforcement, even to the extent of those some of those properties subsequently applying for retrospective planning application, it being refused, but the fact of the matter has remained that those HMOs have continued to operate. So that is my overriding concern, and certainly in my own ward, where we've had applications around HMOs, I've called them all in. And I would absolutely support the councillors in doing it. As it happens, the ones that I've called in have all been refused. So I am really surprised and concerned, in fact, that the council has, on delegated powers, sought to recommend approval of this application. I think it's wholly inappropriate for this particular area. Yeah, I've got lots of them in my ward, but the other issue is I don't think it's necessarily an issue of concentration. It's where they are, and in relation to the neighbouring residents, it can only, you know, it could just be one and cause significant disruption, as I think Councillor Williams has alluded to earlier. It doesn't need to be lots of them, it can only be one, and it still causes problems. So I just think that the 10% thing is a bit misdirected. That the issue is there is no question about the fact that we are short of housing in this place, but you know, trying to solve it or contribute towards it by putting an HMO in an area where it's simply not suitable, it just seems to me to be what seems to me to be wrong. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clement. Councillor Clement.
Thank you, Chair. I think the plan and the layout of this has been quite sensibly and sensitively arranged. I mean, you could have a family of 6 or more living in a house of that size. You know, you could have several teenagers in there who might have a car each. So, you know, parking, I I can't see that the parking is such a huge issue, but considering especially that we're building whole blocks of flats with no parking in our town. So I don't see that as a big problem personally. Regards the kind of people that live in HMOs, I have lived in between two HMOs, one either side of my house. One was a house occupied by young men, and one was a house occupied by young women. Absolutely delightful, no problem. Wouldn't even know they were there half the time, and actually less invasive than when there was a young family living in there. So, I don't think it's fair to assume that there will be a problem just because it's an HMO.
Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, I would like to, I guess, kind of echo some of the things that Councillor Clements just said. The parking does seem to be fine, in that there's plenty of space in front on the land around the house to park vehicles, and there couldn't possibly be more than 6 vehicles if there can't be more than 6 people in the house, because I can't quite imagine someone who needs to live in an HMO owning 2 cars for the one person, to be honest. That doesn't seem likely to me. I am a little worried about this talk of the type of people. That doesn't feel like a planning matter to me. I think we should stop that now. And I haven't seen any planning reasons to refuse this whatsoever. I also live in and represent a ward with lots of HMOs in it, and have a different experience than Patrick's, than Councillor Canavan's. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gillett.
Yeah, I think the main issue here is actually, does it fit with the local area plan? Is it something which is essentially should be allowed? It's not whether or not we want an HMO in that area or not. It's to do with the fact that we've got to look at Article 4, we've got to look at CF24 and say, okay, does it fit within that framework? And the framework is very clear on that. The framework is designed to push HMOs into these residential areas and away from areas like Winton in the way that it is written, because you wouldn't get this planning permission if it was on Green Road in Winton, for example, because you're already over the threshold. So the whole policy is actually designed to push HMOs into these sorts of areas, and that's the thing. However reluctant or difficult that we may feel that decision is to make, that is essentially the policy that we are instructed to reflect, even though it sort of feels a bit counterintuitive to some extent as an area.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gillett. Any Councillor of Parliament?
Thank you. As these plans stand, and in the situation of being at the most one of 2 HMOs in the area, I can't see any issues with this particular application. But my concern is with our known housing needs is basically for 2 and 3 bed places. A house like this looks to me ripe to be converted into 2 decent sized flats, which would much more, from what I understand about local housing needs, go a distance towards helping our housing problems. What I haven't found in the housing needs assessment is any mention of needs for HMOs. So I think maybe some work needs to be done on this for the future, to know what actual need there is for HMOs in BCP. Because as I say, I'm getting some applications near to where I live, an area where we've never had, and they're fairly small houses, but they're still managing to get 6 rooms. Really, are we in a position that we're being asked to and giving consent for places that actually will be white elephants and won't be lived in? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think we need, as a committee, as a council, some help on whether that is the case or not. But as I say, on this specific application, I can't see any problem as it stands. So I'm very, well, I might as well do it. Propose that we accept it.
Thank you. So that's a proposal. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling. Any last debate? I think we've explained different angles and whatever, so we are ready for the vote. So it's 4 if you are approving as set out. So if you vote now for approval.
1, 2.
And vote now for a refusal.
1,
Against.
2, 3.
And any abstentions? No, so that is approved as set out. Thank you. So that finishes the all the application today. Just Mr. Firth, did you have an update on an existing application?
Do you want to do it now or when you finish?
Okay, no, we're finished the meeting now. So that meeting is